Video is still stable. Just to get rid of all this. And all the people remotely will see unless you talk from this main screen.
It's hard to believe.
Okay.
Where do I advance that here though?
Yeah. So go down to the, and then you can just scroll.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Probably.
Restarted it.
Oops, no. Oh, no.
Good morning, everyone. So a few technical issues to get works. I think we're there now. I'd like to welcome Dwayne again, and see you're back then, Jill. So that's good. We'll start moving on with prior to today's meeting, the board met in closed sessions to review and discuss matters that, in their opinion, fell under Section 35 of the Police Services Act, and as per the Owen Sound Police Service Report bylaw, Section 19.1.
One more. We're just having a technical difficulty. We'll be right with you.
Okay, we'll try that again. I think we got that strange echo fixed now. Just continuing on with the prior to today's meeting, we also received a presentation from the newly appointed Inspector General Devon Clunas, Ontario's first Inspector General of Policing, as well as Deputy Inspector General Ketherell and Dr. Michelle Lloyd. They talked about their new roles with respect to policing Ontario and the partnership that they will have and are developing with police services. So moving on to approval of the agenda, may I have a motion for that? Garth, thank you. Seconded, Ian, thank you. Jill, in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. John, you're good? Yes. Carried. Any declaration of conflict of interest arising out of the minutes and matters listed on the agenda? Hearing none. I'm going to move it over to presentations and deputations, and we have Dave Preston with us today. He's been updating our policy review. So Dave, just with a background, Dave was the previous chief of police for Saugeen Shores and has spent a number of years with the Solicitor General's office. And over the summer, he's been working on updating our policies to ensure they reflect current legislation and requirements under the Police Services Act. As an aside, when he isn't working on policy updates, he's at fishing, so our work sort of took a back seat over the salmon derby last week in August, but that's okay.
It didn't go well.
I'm sure he was thinking of our policies as he was reeling in the big one. Dave, I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. I just got a quick little slide here, or not even a slide, but just a Word doc here that just once it loads up, I'll go through it. But thank you for the introductions. And he actually left out I was moving during all this as well. So
Pardon me.
There we go. Yeah, so this is a project that's actually started a couple of years ago with the area police services and Hanover, West Gray, and Saugeen Shores actually engaged me to do a similar project, and now we've moved over to Owen Sound Police Service joining that cooperative. And once I go through, you'll see the advantages of doing what we're doing from a cost saving perspective. Just to start off, some legal stuff. The Police Service Board is responsible, for adequate and effective policing. They determine the objectives, priorities with respect to the police service. After consultation with the police officer or police chief. And the board also fulfills one of its governance responsibilities by establishing policies, and that's the key right there for effective management of police services. So the board established policies. So in other words, they tell the chief what they want done, and then the chief decides how he or she will do it. So under the Act, I'm not going to read all this, but the main one is responsibilities for the chief developing procedures. So, and once we get to the end of this, I think you'll be surprised just how many procedures you actually do have for a police service, and it's growing as I start to write them. But it is significant, and it is a huge undertaking to stay on top of that. And of course, through procedures, that's really how the chief does make sure that the police force carries out their duties according to the Police Services Act. Okay. So the scope of the project, when we first started talking about it, was to review procedures, and very similar to what we've done I did in Saugeen Shores. We decided that we would look at the board's policies as well. Because again, as I said, it starts with the board policies and leads down to the police services procedures. So part of the review process, I'm making recommendations that what procedures and policies should be maintained or combined into new procedures, because things have changed. A lot of these procedures were developed in the early 2002, I think it was where it started, and another upgrade in 2010. Recommendations will be made what procedures and policies to be maintained, and then also which ones should be rescinded. Oh, okay. The other part of what we're trying to do, and when we're done with Owen Sound, all 4 municipal police services in Barrie and Bruce County, procedures will be on a consistent template, a consistent numbering structure that matches the board. So when an officer looks at a procedure dealing with arrest, it'll be very similar to what Saugeen Shores is looking at. However, with some changes
flavor.
to address community, what's unique to your community. The other thing that I provided to the chiefs, and I'll actually give a copy of that to the board when I'm done, but is a reporting review compliance document. So it's going to be a document that's going to show you all the procedures and what the reporting requirements are back to the board contained within that procedure. So the scope is derived from legislation, accepted police practices, and of course, important part, accepted local practices. And when we talk about legislation, we're talking about Police Services Act, adequacy. There's a number of legislations out there that the police have to be aware of and develop procedures as a result of those requirements. So stage one is kind of the area that I'm in, and I'm about halfway through it. The initial step was to review the process, good term status of current procedures. So I've gone through, and the procedures generally are in good shape. There are some updating to be done. The other part that I'm doing is an actual factual review to see where things have actually changed. So if it hasn't already been captured previously in the procedures, then I'm making sure it's up to date. Or even determine if it's even still needed. And then the other thing that we've been doing, or I have been doing, and we'll do with Owen Sound as well, is quite often it's suitable to combine certain procedures into one versus having one or two or three. And in some cases, we're separating them. But to give you an example, and one key procedure for a police service is criminal investigations management. That procedure on its own sits at about 60 pages. So what we've done is we've created sub procedures to that so that it doesn't get too complicated. You're trying to read through 300-page type procedures. Assessment review stage reporting, again, with the police service, as I go along, I'm doing those reports. And the main reason why I'm getting ahead of myself, but when I get down to the option to make it more efficient from a cost perspective, I'm doing it as I go versus going through them all. I did read through them all. I know what you have, what you don't have. But now I'm going through systematically each procedure and how it relates back to the ministry guidelines and regulatory requirements. So, and from procedure to procedure, and part of the process is I'm meeting on a regular basis with your police service, and we're doing a consultation process. So I'm actually putting up my draft procedures right up there, and we go through them line by line and make the changes where maybe I didn't capture the local flavor, terminology within police service, rank structure, that type of thing. And again, develop it and write new procedures. That's why Owen Sound will gain a few new procedures. And this is a process that I've gone through with the other three. And again, it's to provide consistency throughout Grey & Bruce. So where applicable and where I've combined procedures, I'm addressing the ministry recommended guidelines. And when I say ministry, I do realize it's a solicitor, ministry or solicitor general. And the guidelines still exist. So we're still using those as our guideline in the course of legislative requirements. And then, as I mentioned this earlier, and I'm doing this now, and that's why we're actually ahead of the game. So I'm actually writing procedures now, and we're actually finalizing some of them. We're putting them into the new template and the formatting structure. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. Applying number systems that's consistent with the board policies. Again, the board have adopted from the most part the ministry recommended board sample policies. Those numbering structures, that's now being applied to the police services. So your procedure, I'll use the rest again, the number will be the same as what it is for the police service. Because right now it's different. One of the things that we did do in the other 3 police services is we had hyperlinks. So when you go into procedure and it references several other, they'll be able to hit the hyperlink on that and it'll take them right to that other procedure. So that's a nice feature. Again, that's the document that I'll produce at the end is a review and auditing reporting requirements. So this is what I was talking about with the options. So being the 4th partner in this project, I'm using a similar template. We're using a similar structure. We're using similar language. It makes it a whole lot easier for me to use that same format for each procedure and then adjust it to meet the needs of your police service. So it virtually cuts in half what it would have charged you originally if I had to do it standalone. And going forward, what has been happening in the other 3 police services, if something comes up and we need a new procedure, for example, my fee might be $250, we split it 3 ways. So down the road, it does help. And as the chief will probably confirm, to keep up with the number of procedures that have to be reviewed and redrafted, and it's an onerous task to stay on top of it. One of the things that I did when I started the project with the other is I did a consultation with various stakeholders. So the health unit, the sexual south centers, the hospitals, the women's shelters. There's about 12, maybe 15 agencies. I actually sat down, took my draft procedures and said, does this match what you folks do and what the police do, and draw that together. So that was a very valuable exercise because in a number of areas, they found that they were outdated on what they were doing or what they were saying in their policies, and it didn't line up with what the police said they were going to do and what they say they were going to do. And the big one was name changing terminology. Victim services used to be called Victors, and it's now VKO, things like that. Also, and I know he's there, Dwayne's been very helpful. He communicates with me on a regular basis to ensure that if something has cropped up that has changed, I can reach out to him, he'll let me know, and vice versa.
Yep. So Dave, just a quick question. The stuff that you've just talked about going out with different community groups,
Yep.
Does that not end up being kind of a center key to the whole local safety plan?
Community wellness.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that whole group, like that's just kind of the groundwork for them, isn't it? That should be.
Yeah, and during that process, and back when I was filling in at Victim Services, I was part of that for a very brief period of time. And your procedures will be updated to address exactly what you're talking about.
Kind of a
Yep.
The groundwork could be a foundation for it.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you looked at, it's not just here, but all of the services.
Yeah.
If you looked at the procedures, their names for some of the agencies have changed. Children's Aid doesn't exist anymore in theory. So, I mean, so stuff like that.
Dave, can I ask you to flip to the very first page? John Tamming, by the way. I don't think that. What's your last name?
Yeah, Preston.
So the first paragraph there says that, Joe, can you hear me? Okay, no, that's fine. So the board fulfills its governance by establishing policies. So if you ask me now, and I've been on the board like 3 or 4 months at the most, maybe a little longer, I won't have a clue what policies I've asked the police as a board, the police chief to implement in terms of procedures. So
Well-
can you expand a bit on that? I assume we're free to make any policies we want, provided they're legal.
You can make, yes, you can
So
direct.
where are these policies? Are
Well,
they-
well, first off, the ministry have established sample board policies for police services boards. Okay. But then you're gonna have either you call them bylaws, or you could call them procedures. There's different names throughout the province that are over and above what the ministry requirement.
So when
require
you're
you to
done,
have.
are you going to begin your binder basically with a list of policies that we give the chief to implement? I just want to know where I'll find these policies.
Yeah, so.
I think there's a list of policies in your board book.
In the board book, right, yeah. And are you updating that at all? Or?
That's
Oh,
part of what we're doing.
Okay, the policies get updated as well.
Yeah, so I'm systematically gonna go through all your policies.
I get the procedure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, with, trying to give you an example where the board may have come up with a policy to deal with, direct the chief to develop policies on, you have a traffic plan in a particular area. So you can't tell the chief how to do that, but you can develop policies saying that, you know, as a police services board, our policy is to maintain seats, safe streets. I'm just trying to add lib here, and then you can word it however you want. You just can't tell the chief to do it or how. If this is what we want, then the chief would turn around and either look at his procedures to see what is there, to see if it addresses it already. If it doesn't, then that's where the police service would have to develop a procedure to address that.
As a supplementary question, do you anticipate significant changes will be required once the regulations are given to us in April?
I wish Dwayne was sitting here with us, but I'm hoping that the guidelines that we have somehow will be maintained and brought into a regulation of some sort. They may not have the same numbers. We may have to readdress that. But right now, and this is my opinion, the number system that you have could continue unless the ministry came out and said, okay, here's already numbers. Because right now, not everybody follows the ministry numbering system. So,
Thanks, Chief.
so, and part of going through what you have, anything over and above that, what the ministry recommend you have, if I see something that I think you should have, that would be a recommendation I would make. And I made 5 of them to Saugeen Shores and actually broke them for over and above. I guess. So that's, you got to have the ministry ones, and then after that, it becomes a board decision on policy.
So one last question then. Do you anticipate a dialogue on this? In other words, you'll come to us with a draft?
Well,
And
yeah.
If I think some of the policies, just if I have questions about them, I think they might be tweaking or something, is there?
Yeah, so for the ministry board recommended policies, they're pretty straightforward. So what I'll be looking for is factual, make sure you've had things and you've updated to include some of the changes that have come. But the other ones, yes. So. Okay. So the bottom line is, and I can't really quote the figures because we're really not sure where we are right now. I have a max where I'm heading, but I can tell you that the savings is substantial doing it this way. It's so much easier for me to do it.
Yeah.
So to get back to, I just went back to show an example.
go to.
to Southern Shores. So when I'm done, oh, I gotta go back one more. So what I'm showing you right now is Fogging's final product. So when we were done with Southern Shores, although I continue to write procedures for them, I got a new one for you. It'll get done, but I'll talk to you about it in a minute, that I'm doing for the other services. So and the board will get something very similar to this, only it won't be quite as elaborate. So you get an archive file, counterterrorism file, an index, like create an actual index. So if you want to print them all out, you can. A resource document forms, resource, oh, that's master. So I provide the service a Word copy, a member's PDF copy, and a master PDF copy. There's that chief's reporting document that I talked about. That one's actually one that Dwayne probably provided to the board already. And that's the one that I created. So to give you an example of what it's going to look like, go to the PDF. And I'll go to the, so once I go into the policies, so this is what the police service will see. They're not going to see all the other stuff. They're going to see this. So ministry recommended procedures, support procedures. So those are over and above. And we decided because of the changes for the requirement of the number of different procedures related to human resources, we created a new folder. And then there's that resource document. So I'll just go into ministry recommended. And we'll go to the law enforcement. So this is what they're going to look like. This is what the members will see. So of course it'll say on sound, it'll have your press, it'll have all the required information that the ministry likes to see and hear. I've created my policy's been any procedure over 5 pages, I create an index. The index is searchable. And there's one of the hyperlinks, so that's the hyperlink. So this procedure for arrest is referring back to the prisoner care control. So if the member wanted to go and look at it, they can just click on it and it takes you back to that procedure. So it just makes it a little quicker for the members, and there is a little bit of work maintaining that, but the way I have it set up, if I could do it, your tech people would be able to do it. So that's kind of what you're going to look like. And I guess I would have to talk to the board, but if you want your policies to look like this, then I would convert them over to that template as well. But it's entirely up to you. I think yours is pretty similar.
It is.
Yeah, to that, if I remember right.
And I think it makes sense to do that too, if they're all forward consistent,
Yeah,
especially when you're doing your update.
yeah. So, and most of yours wouldn't have a table of contents because most of the ministry policies are 2 pages,
Oh, right.
3 pages at the most. And I should have said this right at the beginning, and I use the term, so when I say policies, it's the board. When I say procedures, it's the police service.
And the procedures support the policies.
Yeah.
How you enforce them to enact.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So at some point, I do need an electronic version of your stuff. So
The policy.
get your policies. And then work away. And then once I get into a draft stage, then I would like to come back to me and then say, okay, here's what I'm fixing. And when I look at all your other stuff, then there may be some in there that I'll make recommendations that you should have that are missing. It doesn't mean you have to have them, but that's just me making a recommendation based on my experience over the years working with the ministry and dealing with boards.
I think they're fairly consistent across even Ontario because when we receive them from Dwayne or from the minister, office and we adopt them. We don't do a lot of change. We haven't done a lot of changes in there.
Yeah, and there could be some a good example, Saugeen Shores, both board empties service have a policy and a procedure on response to Chantry Island. Chantry Island, sorry, the island just outside Southampton, because the waters overpeak with the island is theirs. So anyways, that was outside of ministry requirements, but they were running into all kinds of problems. So the board developed direction to the chief through their policy procedure, which I updated both.
So Dave, just a quick for instance,
Yep.
I don't want to dwell on this, just
Yep.
a quick for instance, to help me separate policy from operation.
Yep.
If we had a policy that we want our department to be incredibly sensitive to the Aboriginal population, okay?
Yep.
Let's say that was one of our policies. I'm not saying the force isn't, I'm very happy
Yep.
with yours, yeah. Well, let's just say that, okay? And let's say that on the arrest procedure then, I'd like to see something inserted. I'm just quoting this, that if an Aboriginal person is arrested in town, that the Friendship Center be notified as soon as practical, just as a for instance. Is that a proper thing to come from the board, or is that meddling with the chiefs? And where is that gonna?
You could say that the board would like blah, 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 but then it's up to the chief to decide how he does it.
Okay.
Now, saying all that, and I'm glad you brought that up, that's one procedure you didn't have, but you do now.
Oh, we do, oh.
I
had no idea. I was
you didn't have it until 2 weeks ago. And that's not uncommon, because that was a new one that came out, and I had to jig it a little bit because the ministry guideline still uses Aboriginal. So I switched everything to Indigenous, and brought it up to date.
I just use that. Okay.
Well,
I can't.
In brackets.
I did consulting with a former officer who's now teaches in Peterborough, and they're both right, but the correct term now is Indigenous. But that would be a good time for that one to be reviewed. Because the board will have a policy on it as well.
You might need a table of definitions.
Well, yeah.
No, just for
Could be bigger than the
Indigenous,
policy.
brackets, Aboriginal, whatever people relate to the old term, like,
Yep.
like children's aid.
What are the total number of procedures you're up to now?
I'm guessing right now you're probably going to hit about 180 by the time I'm done.
And just to give us some idea, that's like one I just pulled up, prisoner care and control, 47 pages long. So you have something officer coming in, it's just 180 procedures for really everything. But those procedures change on almost every case law decision and that
That's right,
sort of thing that comes in. Back in Waterloo, there's 3 or 4 people that are full-time and quality assurance. All they do is audits and procedure updates. Like that's the complexity that we've got into just to give you some.
And your stuff really wasn't in that bad shape. It just needed organizing and updating, really. Like just about everything was there, and the only ones that you were missing were the new ones that came out. So
Just a bit of a wrap up.
Yep.
The opportunity came up. Dave had some time. I've been looking at doing this for a long time. Off the corner of a desk, as you heard, it doesn't work. It doesn't happen. The ability to bring Dave in. Dave's background, for those that don't know, he's the chief in Saugeen Shores for a number of years, and then he was the Dwayne Sprague of the ministry for 10 years after he was done being a chief. So his knowledge, and especially in this area, is vast, and the ability to draw him in and catch us up in a quick, timely manner before we go and have all kinds of changes for the new policing act. It was just such an opportunity that that's why I passed it around to the board chair and asked for the approval to start it before fishing season and get things going. And as far as they weren't in bad shape, the policies and procedures, but there were a number of those signed not by my predecessor, but his predecessor. So they needed a quick update and review, and the opportunity is there to move forward. And certainly there are some advantages to working, because we do a lot of work with the other municipal services in the area. The advantages of everybody doing things in the same manner was significant as well. So just a quick update to bring everybody up to speed. I thought was important to this morning.
it's fantastic. Want to talk about the diversity?
Yeah, we can just mention that So there was some inquiries about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and certainly that's one of the procedures that I think we're gonna add into this review, and get some direction from a policy standpoint from the board as to what you want to do, and then we'll implement that through a new procedure, and look at what other services are doing, and how we can put the local spin on that.
Yeah, and just to point out, I did a little bit of research on this over the last couple of days, but you have a number of procedures that address that now, and part of what I'm doing is to make sure the language it meets those through. But what the practice is now, from what I've been finding out, is that most police services have gone to a plan, and then the plan refers back to some of your procedures. But within the plan and what I'm going to suggest is that we start off with a strategic plan where you set up your goals and your objectives that will lead into, and that it would continue as a plan versus a procedure, because you have the procedures already, but the plan would then tie everything together. And part of that whole process, one of the goals, if I was to make the recommendation, would be that you have a committee within the police service that make up the diversity of the police service. So if you have an indigenous person, obviously a female, so on and so forth, that would be your committee, and probably a board member, because quite often the plans are driven by the board, and then the work becomes done by that committee. So, and that would tie into your recruitment policy, your promotional policies or procedures, your hiring, so there is some work to be done, but I think to start things off with some kind of a strategic plan, and part of that goal would be to form that committee and then move forward. There's a lot out there, so it's easy to get the information. A little bit of work with regards to census and to come up with your makeup in your community, and you probably have some.
So you'd like to see the board form that committee, or how does the committee get formed?
No, the committee has to be from within the police service, because they're going to be dealing with the recruitment, equal opportunities, all those things, which we have already. But a board member should probably be a member of it.
But the other thing is, as Devon said too, is that it would reflect the community that we live in. You wouldn't take the same policy from Toronto or London or Windsor and try and jam it into here. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I looked at about 8, and they're all a little different when it comes to how they started it. But basically, they've all started basically from the strategic plan committee, and then from there it flows into almost like your business plan. So it will become a mainstay of this police service. And of course, the key would be then tying your existing procedures into that, and then back and forth, make sure the same. And that's what I'm doing in your procedures now, is to make sure that the ministry required equal opportunity discrimination policy directed from the board to police service is using current language versus language from 2002. So those type of things. And I've already looked at your recruitment, and it has a lot of that in there already on how you advertise and that type of thing as well. So, but it would all have to tie into this plan and vice versa. But it needs to come from within the members.
Service itself.
Chief, this time.
And from what I've seen, most services have like a three person team. It's not full time, but it's anyways, that's just my thoughts.
Through the chair, I think it'd be a shame though, if you didn't strive a little bit more. Like, it's easy to say we're 98% Asian out there. But what I'd like us to think about is the 24-year-old kid who may be applying for grant, who doesn't see any of his own people here in the police building. Or a refugee kid, and I know a lot of them, I've worked a lot with them lately, from Sudan and Somalia and so forth, Eritrea, locally, and Ian's nothing to, I'd like them to see something in this building that reflects something of themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it'd be a shame to say, well, we're 98% Caucasian, what are you gonna do? So Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds a bit.
Yeah, but you're right, and I can tell you right now, taking the fact that 90% is Caucasian would not pass, would not fly if you have this set up properly from the beginning. That's where you need that internal. And it's really up to whatever you want. I mean, you could have an outside representative. It's done differently throughout, so that would be part of the work that we could do going forward. And because I have examples from London, I have some smaller Cornwall.
Well, London has quota, they got targets, right? Pretty sure.
Well, their targets are the same as performance objectives. So for example, they say, we're gonna make sure that we're reflective of our female population, and then they set a target of how they're gonna. So it just, it's different terminology. But I think the big thing is, getting up with, say, 3 goals, 1 to get that committee going. I'd have to think what the other 2 would be, but then you got to have that group going and time to do the work. So,
Great.
is there anything else?
No, I'll call you. Schedule.
Yeah, so I'm I figured out where we left off, so we can whenever you want to set dates. So
Thank you very much for coming in.
give me some options there.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Okay, that's great. No,
Thanks,
yeah, anytime.
Your Lion's Head, are you up there yet or not?
No, we hope the rates are on in October.
What road, John?
Do you know where Lakewood Estates is?
I do, yes.
Yeah, right across the
We're
road.
broadcasting live.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Everybody knows where I'm moving to.
Well, then I won't say I'll see you at the tap.
Oh, okay, I know where that is.
Or which one? There is only one. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, confirmation of the minutes of the public session held June 23rd. I need a motion for that, please. Thank you, John. Seconder? Ian, thank you. Jill, in favor? Thank you. Garth, good, thank you. Business arising out of the public session minutes held June 23rd, 2021. Hearing none. Correspondence received. Back the first part of July, Donna Jensen, sponsored one of the newcomer families, explained to Jason Craney, our community safety officer, that she was asked to take part in writing a book on the new experience community. It's a good segue, right? Given a newcomer experience and their experience with police service, she wanted to include a piece on the Owen Sound Police Service because of the great service many newcomers have received from the service that's moving to Owen Sound. I think if you read her letter, she's very complimentary to the service and a great job the service is doing welcoming newcomers to Owen Sound and making them feel safe with the police around, unlike the corruption and bribery they've experienced in their homeland. And Ian's just they would pick up a book that was yesterday, or
Yeah, book launch Sunday afternoon, and probably 150 people down there. Jason down there is really respected amongst all of the community for his efforts and his personality. Was easy to get along with. So it's approximately 20 stories in there. Some people don't want you to know who they are because it could reflect on their family. That's pretty tough situations. One parent coming with children and the other one not being able to come for several years, or else one coming and then bringing the family up later for several years of separation. So, a child not meeting dad for all of a sudden 4 or 5 years old, they don't know dad's, some of those stories coming out. But it's not only a story about them coming, but it's also the story about how they've been accepted here, and how they've been treated, and churches that have been involved, and how the police have been involved to break down those barriers. And we've got a report coming later from Jason that talks about his summer hiring, which is a pretty advanced things that John is concerned about, pretty advanced, pretty smart, and congratulations to the chief and all you guys for thinking ahead and doing something like that. So I think we're doing really good stuff, and we're being recognized in the community. The police board is being, the police services, not board, is being recognized for good stuff for doing well. His report. You think some of those countries, if the police come to your door, it probably means that you voted against the current chief and you're being arrested for the wrong reason and held without a trial. But they're not coming to your door when your brother-in-law or cousin just got murdered down the street. You know, it's so this is a huge adjustment for a lot of people to say, hey, I get to vote. My vote is going to get counted, and it's not going to be blurred. That the police are coming to my door and they've got a smile on their face. And they're helping me.
It's totally different.
It's totally different now. So people,
That's great. And I think Jason's doing a wonderful job, and all the officers too. Great.
Yeah, I read the book over the last 2 nights, and it's a quick read, and there was a really significant highlight for the police service and the work Jason's done. It was excellent.
Copies being made available in the community.
oh, this is should be doing this. This is a Ginger Press.
Okay, it's available at
Yeah, Ginger Press.
Yeah. Great, wonderful, good stuff. Just one thing under correspondence, I received a notice from the Ontario Association of Service Boards, and they're putting on their annual labor conference on November 18th, and I think I sent that information to all of the board. If you'd like to take part in the meeting by Zoom, please let Kayla Wardell, our new executive assistant, know, and she can make arrangements to register.
Is that going to be Zoom or?
Yes.
It'll be Zoom, yes. Currently, that's the way it's
We
scheduled.
can do it here.
Just under item number 8, Chairman's report, September 14th, Zone 5 of the Ontario Association of Police Service Board was held a quarterly meeting by Zoom again. I think Ian and Jill were the only persons who weren't able to attend due to prior scheduling conflicts. Jeff McGuire, the Executive Director of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, gave an update on the CSPA and the work that's being done to build regulations to support the new act. He also touched on the work they are doing to develop an assistant vaccination policy among the Ontario Police Associations. Dwayne, our representative from the ministry, also gave a brief presentation and expects the new CSPA to come into effect first quarter of 2022. I say that with hesitation. It's a mark on the wall at this point in time. With respect to training, it's also in the development stages, and more information should be forthcoming. Lisa McDonald, our zone director, gave an update on proceedings at the association. And Dwayne, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we're still tracking, board chair through you. We're still tracking for April 1st for the CSPA to be in force. So that's going to be the main date. So we'll stick with that. And anything I find out this fall, obviously you folks will be informed in terms of, you know, what I hear or what you hear from the OAPSB in terms of board training. But I'll keep you posted as soon as I hear stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you. And that's about all that I have on that part of it. So turn it over to reports from Inspector Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the order is starting.
I hope we got them in the right order for you.
Page 8. So starting off criminal investigations and drug enforcement unit, it's just quite a list of a number of investigations that have happened over the last month. Ongoing sexual assaults committed against an 8-year-old child, including the arrest of 33-year-old father. Scheduled to re-attend court in mid-September for that. The child continues to reside with her mother and supervision of child and family services. Fairly recently, child abuse investigation, 6-year-old child subjected to extreme physical punishment by the common law spouse of the child's mother. The child was basically restrained in a car seat that had been placed in the bathtub and subjected to formal water torture. Struck in the face of the shower head. After the victim's mother intervened, she was also violently assaulted. This male's charged with a total of 13 criminal offenses. It's a particularly bad one. The pictures in this to turn your stomach in terms of support of the girl and what ended up happening to her, bruising to the face and that kind of thing. So we'll see some response to the courts with that one. Since the prior crosswalk's gone in, there's been 2 mischief that have happened down there. One being some paint spread across the crosswalk early on, and another incident on August 18th, where somebody did burn out on the crosswalk in a Dodge truck. These are not investigations that are closed as of yet, and although they would seem to be relatively minor, we're putting a lot of work into these because of the significance of what it represents.
Is there a sign there saying you're under surveillance, or is that pointless?
There isn't. We do have cameras that we've installed.
Yeah,
down
no,
there.
but it's the public told you're under surveillance.
No. Anyway, the both of these have gone to Crime Stoppers. They'll probably be republished in Crime Stoppers. One of our detectives is actually going through quite a volume of information, which has come through the MTO, trying to identify the truck. It's rather specific, but basically it has to be open search of the MTO to get all the registrations for particular vehicles that are registered up in the area here. So I'd like to say that neither one of these are parked. Fortunately, with the footage that we got, both were at night, so we weren't able to get a license plate, but we were able to get enough to identify the vehicle, at least the type of vehicle, and same thing with the people that did the original paint. Some reasonable video, but still has not resulted in somebody being identified for that video. First one was taken up to all the high schools, run through teachers, principals as well. So still active investigations. July 31st, breaking under at Old Sound business location, laptop and hard drive stolen. Tried to get entry to gain into the safe. Unsuccessfully. Video footage was obtained and allowed for under be charged by detectives. Arrested from methadone clinic, 28-year-old male from Hanover, charged with breaking into commit. August 7th, 2 males committed a robbery, $500 cash stolen. Identified as a non-payment of drug debt, essentially. The male was eventually arrested on August 23rd. Located time of arrest, a number of illicit packages of cannabis edibles, which are not the regular store approved variety. Charged with possession of illicit cannabis and remanded into custody. And the second male was arrested on August 25th. So that was wrapped up. We helped out on a police service enforcement confinement investigation where detectives did some interviewing on their behalf. A trafficking investigation for Durham. We were asked to review some video on that. Homicide that was a number of months ago. We're just finally digging out of volume work that's come from that. We were up in the neighborhood of 200 tasks that end up being created out of that. Task is typically a interview or follow up and that sort of thing. So it's really our massive investigations that are all hands on deck for months. That with the assistance of the OPP, obviously, but just now getting back to where we can get our heads above water on the other things that are going on. Situation table, 2 members of the criminal investigation branch are representing some police service on the situation table, which is a collection of community agencies who share information and resources for the purpose of conducting interventions with members of the public. Identified as being acutely elevated risk situations. Meetings every Tuesday on that, and currently virtually.
Can I just add into that? So that's the revamp of the situation to start table. And it falls under the community safety wellbeing planning, and it's one of the action tables for the community safety wellbeing plan. So there was a strong push by all the members and the steering committee to really get that table moving again. And it stalled. There was no direction. There was no staff support. So under the community safety wellbeing planning, the staff member on that has taken the helm and assisted so that it's a regular weekly meeting now. It's bringing cases forward, and it's a great opportunity to reinvest in that situation and divert people who have acutely elevated risk outside of the policing and the emergency response. So.
The other thing of note, we've been tasking the CID branch, and usually with background checks the last month or so. That's just been a rash of hiring in terms of executive assistant, board assistant, financial coordinator, recruit constable, number of communicators, number of hiring process, the detectives are signed, when the appropriate background investigation goes along with that. So, quite a few of those in the last month. That also using the cover some staffing shortages in uniform. So we're set the shifts during July and August. Last thing I'll comment on here is drug overdose information. And unfortunately, the number needs to go up by another one during the last weekend. Others more 11 deaths. Well, it's not on the page. I believe we were 4 in 2019, 8 in 2020, now 6 in 11 in 2021. Not that that's uncommon in the province, but these numbers continue to trend upwards. I've said this before, but prior to COVID kicking in, the opioid crisis was hot on everybody's mind, and I think it's happened with COVID taking over the news. It's kind of fallen by the wayside, and it's important to look at these numbers and realize this doesn't land continuing worse. We need to work with public health at the time when these happens to try and get the message out and that sort of thing. But putting more on this one. So that is, absolutely any questions, drugs, and investigations. As you're aware, we've also reinstated the core unit, which is Professor Siobhan Martin. She just got started in August, actually July. And this first report that you're going to see, you can who's providing feedback on the report that you'll be seeing moving forward from her. 84 hours work, 11.5 foot patrol for criminal charges. I believe there's also the July report as well. And she's been doing a lot of work with the downtown businesses. She's up to 42 or 44 businesses actually being visited, where she's providing her contact information or cell phone numbers to be that first line of support if it's a non-emergency situation. Having issues with downtown nuisance crime or that sort of thing, they can get a hold of Siobhan directly. She's also been, I took her down to the DIA a couple of meetings ago and introduced her to everybody down there as well. And now school back in, just recently she's been doing a lot of work on some of the student issues that have happened at some of the schools between her and Jason. Spending a bunch of time on the OSPSS and actually getting some good work done directly with the school, where the school is actually taking back the role of just a suspension yesterday on a student that was identified by Siobhan and Jason to be involved in some off-campus nuisance issues that have been going on. So that seems to be working out very well. We're trying very much to get ahead of that before it creates a longer-term problem for us. So that's the core report, and you'll continue to see them coming out. Although I can say she had 3 weeks, she just returned yesterday, not 3 weeks holidays. So the next month might be a little bit less.
So what's the expectation for her in terms of foot patrol as a percentage of her hours? I noticed this is 12 for 84. I'm curious.
So she's not the only one that gets assigned foot patrol down there, and quite often our part-timers or day shift officers. The expectation is really dependent on what other assignments that she's doing. So obviously September is back to school month, so there's a fair bit of proactive engagement that's happening with that. One of the foot patrol hours up in the strip mall areas up around the SPSS secondary school.
The intention is she is the primary foot patrol or not?
No. She focuses a lot of her time on the downtown core, but that's not her sole responsibility. Core is really designed to be that proactive piece that we just don't have anymore because of home response. The volume of calls going up 5 to 7% a year. The officers not, the time's just not available for the regular officers.
No, but they've gone.
Yeah, just that retirement as well.
Got retired.
Dave's done.
They've done. Yep.
That's what.
Joined in 74. Should have seen the two of us one Friday stopping traffic here. And we changed the lights.
Auxiliary unit. So we're slowly bringing the auxiliary unit back up to speed. The participants back participating with ride-alongs, total volunteer hours 24, and I expect to start to see that time as the fall kicks in. Fall, of course, is a busier time for the auxiliary, where we get into, sounds like at least the DIA, the Santa Claus parade is back to its normal, looking like it's going to be a regular parade. Festival or the lights also is looked after by our auxiliary. The one item of note here on August 7th, we had some auxiliary members that were in to facilitate a bike safety workshop. Again, Jason Granny and our summer students that we're here working with Jason. Planned in partnership with our service and the Sydenham Junior Optimist Club and hosted the Keystone Avenue West. It's the first event in partnership with the Optimist Club, which went very well, and we'll be working together with them as the future comes on.
Santa Claus parade traffic is going to be more like 4 o'clock in the afternoon instead of morning.
Yeah, and I think they're focusing on another retail event, trying to, I think the adjustment that time was to reduce the gap between the festival opening and parade, and also keeping people downtown for an hour or two, and creating some kind of retail enticement to hopefully boost that. Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
My
Moving on.
report. Would you like me to proceed?
Yes, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Okay, so collision statistics for the summer, everything was fairly consistent. There was no real anomalies there. June 37 collisions, July 31, and August 31. Are there any questions for collisions? Moving on to community services office, we've already been talking about the great work that our community services officers are doing. I'll just hit on a couple highlights from the report here. We had our GIPI students hired, and we had a summer program with them that lasted 8 weeks. It was an excellent program. You'll hear more about that program later. We had a positive ticket program, and so we're working with the youth in our community, visiting where youth are present, sports teams at the arenas. Circle K, Freshie, and McDonald's restaurant all donated positive tickets to be handed out to the youth in the community when they were identified with positive actions. We partnered with the Junior Youth Optimist Club, Wickwadon, Keystone, and ran a bike safety day for families and youth, held on July 31st. There was also another one held on August 24th. We continued our partnership with the Newcomer Family Program and agreed to help celebrate Newcomer Week in Great Bruce, which just recently took place, September 13th to 18th. And we provided information session to newcomer seniors focusing on elder abuse. Our Citizens on Patrol program started up again, ran through August with a recruitment plan for this fall to get more members involved. He was also involved in the creation of training for the local school board administrators and police officers on human trafficking. This is a partnership with the UPP, Victim Services, and the Women's House of Great Bruce. Did work on a frauds and scams webinar and presented newcomers on that. Worked with community living and the REACH program, and provided information as it related to police matters, enforcement, and safety, and also presentation on bike safety at the Alpha Street Family Resource Center and Keystone. That's just a few of the highlights that occurred over the summertime. Any questions?
This is summer.
Yeah,
Very
there's some nice photos with your report. Chief Ambrose with two of our indigenous youth that created some artwork, and that is displayed in our police service. The opening of the Pride Crosswalk, the Y Camp Safety Day, and we had Buster up there, and as well as our summer students, and also a photo of Jason and some of the YIPI students. YIPI stands for Youth in Policing Initiative, and it's a program funded through a grant that allows us to hire students. Moving on to lost hours and training. During June, we had 6 members report sick with amounting to 232 hours over 20 shifts. 10 members in July, amounting to 164 hours, and then very good to see here, only 5 members amounting to 54 hours of lost time in August. That was very encouraging. We have 1 member that remains on WSIB and 3 members that are on LTE. Some of the training that occurred over the summer, we had ongoing in-house training with our new communicators that we hired, cell monitors, data clerks. We had a recruit who was down at the police college. We had a member attend the coach officer course at OPC, and they've coached 1 officer, and they're in the process of coaching another officer. Returned from the college recently. And we also had 1 member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police Leadership course, which was quite comprehensive and spanned over about a couple months, and they had to invest about 4 weeks in that. There's no question. Moving on to frontline patrol, we had 420 highway traffic act charges laid between the platoons and part-time officers, 11 compliances, 160 cautions, 20 liquor license act charges, 358 criminal code charges, 56 POA or bylaw charges, and 388 hours of patrol. We had 36 ride checks over the summer months. We had 1 provincially funded ride program that was conducted with other area services, and we had 10 impaired driving charges later this summer. Those are my reports.
Thank you, Search Committee. Moving on to reports from Director of Civilian Services, Christopher Flynn, who's going to be Director. Okay, thank
We
you.
almost had Director Flynn here this morning. She got all the way from outside matter.
Oh, no.
I was hopeful that she'd be back. So start with board bylaw. It is, we had 4 taxi driver licenses either issued or renewed, and 1 vehicle license issued, and 4 adult entertainer licenses issued last month. Comparison is there for 2020. It's interesting.
Could you, I don't know much about this. 4 adult entertainment licenses in 1 month. And what is that?
Any new adult entertainer that comes to town has to be licensed.
Oh,
by the
okay,
city,
it's
so-
not an established.
No, it's when they,
Basically.
I just thought
they
it was-
rotate the entertainers.
Oh, the harp. That's fine.
Doesn't say the harb is. Doesn't say the harb though.
We've got them.
Just clarifying that for-
No,
Activity and that sort of thing.
Popping up like that.
As far as courts go, 1 special constable resignation he's also hired, probably only spent 3 or 4 weeks as a special constable, and also applied to our regular constable process. So he was a successful applicant for our current process. Actually just started at the police college this week, last week, the 13th, 15th last month. Custody's transported, 8 for the OPP, 1 for us, 71 for sound police service persons in custody appeared by audio appearance. 18 meals in custody, special constable total hours 1,060. Wondering about the increase over 2020. We just hired 4 new special constables. The increase is related to training hours required for that. So, just a bit of training to get up to speed. Just a hard over hours.
Through the chair, please, I like to push because I don't understand things. It's been 18 months now that the courts have basically closed. I appreciate that you have to still monitor the courthouse. I go in there regularly, I have opportunities there. But I have to say, if you're reassigning the existing special constables because there's just not enough work doing the transports and stuff, just devil's advocate, why are we hiring more special constables? Just curious. Like, to me, it seems the time that we cut back on special constables. And I'll preface that, Mr. Chair, by if the chief thinks this is going into the weeds of operations, then I'll just retract the question, because I don't need to do that. But it just struck me as a real question. Yeah.
So all of our special constables works at part time. Because of that, the vast majority of second jobs, we have a lot of them that are only available for possibly a day a week for that sort of thing. We've got a number of people that left, so we need to maintain a certain contingent of our part timers just to get the staff number of hours we have there, just because of the extension.
So we have 4 left. We're hiring 4 new ones. Have we lost 4?
Over the last year or two, just say yes.
At least.
You can see why to an outsider it just seems like a place to save money.
And
Courts shut.
the chair, it's not necessarily that they've left. One of them is taking a job as a switchboard operator. One of them is, a couple of them have left. One of them was hired as one of those 4 was hired as a full-time special constable or a full-time constable. 1 or 2 were terminated.
They don't directly reflect. The number of hours doesn't necessarily change, nor do costs change. It's just the number of people that we have to be able to schedule. They may still only get a day or 2 a week. In fact, most of the people that we hired just in this last round, it's a second job for them.
The other thing too is I think that the chief addressed this back in June is the courts have not been closed
No, I know that. I said that. Yeah, I get the courts. I know they have to be there. So.
for security
And-
purposes.
But the manpower stuff decreased.
And-
Shuffling
and-
people around.
And this is something that's forced on us by the province, is to maintain the courts. It's not something we can.
Actually, the shuffling of prisoners hasn't really decreased. It's just in a different location. The number of in custodies coming in has decreased, so the number of officers having to do it has dropped from 2 or 3 or 2 down to 1. But we still have somebody in every day because of custodies. And the cell block here at the station is being used as opposed to cell block up at the court.
Okay. I think summertime challenge with part-timers is the ESA requires that they have blocks off, they're unpaid holiday blocks, but we must assign them to the window. Which is frustrating for them. Some are only working for a day or 2 a week, but.
So one last question on that issue. Do you mandate, look, if you're going to be a special officer constable, you've got to give us 2 days a week. It doesn't have to be.
Generally speaking,
There's a commitment.
There's a commitment or minimum.
Right, thanks.
Records or?
yeah, as far as records go, local formal record checks have been consistent for probably about a year now, 1 to 2 weeks coming back, and 5,128 bulk searches. And again, just about every month, I think I comment that our numbers continue to climb on that, which is a good thing because they're generating revenues for us. So compared to August 2020, 2,800 bulk searches, 5,100. So that's good news.
Very good news.
So if any questions, Director, please.
Thank you, Dave. Moving on to Director of Corporate Services. Suzanne Bell Masterson, and who's
Just
going
1
to?
second, I have to figure out how to switch to the second half of your.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Yep. So looking at our call statistics here. You've got a year-to-date comparison of the chart or of the calls for service, and year-to-date, we're down just very, very slightly, 2.19%. However, when we look over another interesting trend is the severity of the calls, priority levels. It's trending up for the higher priority calls. We have a number of total calls. in the
Yeah,
report.
it's,
Is it those?
yeah, so those two. For
So-
2020, 2021. I think
Yeah,
it went over the edge of the page.
yeah, so we're sitting at 11,531 calls for 2021 right now.
You mentioned that the severity went up. Any special reason for why the severity might have increased?
I almost wonder if that won't be a doctorate student doing a study someday as to the impacts of COVID, so.
So seriousness could be violence versus shoplifting, for example.
Absolutely, or after the fact reported crimes.
I think we're seeing mental health issues suffering, the drug use is going up. How that affects or how that's connected to the COVID epidemic, it's probably, like I said, a big study someday. but we're certainly
Interestingly, I
seeing-
saw a media the other day that said that we didn't get a birth rate boom that they expected because of COVID.
With familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah, so I'm sure we're seeing, I speculate, maybe I should ask, are we seeing an increase in sort of domestic calls?
During the
If you don't know, that's fine, but
during the initial phases of COVID, yes, there was an
Yeah,
increase.
you could see,
You could see a spike, but longer term, I'm not sure that that's there.
Thank you. Moving on to reports from Director Hill, and is that over you?
Oh, gotcha. So Director Hill's been busy. There's some holidays between he and Fred over the summer. Ongoing installations for the alternate dispatch site. So the move up to the Public Works building is continuing and should be done in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Howick and Perth County Fire Dispatch, there's been work done on implementing and bringing those online. Howick this fall and Perth County starting in January. NG 911, they've been doing continued testing and upgrades of features and standards. As well, the presentation to the NINA conference just this past week as well, because of the way that we've been able to implement and get ahead of the game. So that was for the whole province. Continued progress on the new Westbury Hanover Police radio system. We're almost done that. And the Grey County Fire radio system is on schedule and moving forward as well, starting for our January implementation. And we're finishing off our discussions with the county on that. September, up the beginning of September, much of the same thing. We're continuing to do our dispatch map upgrade and testing for our own service. And as well, they've been onboarding new officers, recruits, and the new staff here and the executive as well. So.
Just a question. Back, I guess in the spring, there was Metrolinx had contacted us about doing some mapping for them.
Yeah, they contacted us about some mapping and they move forward with in-house.
Okay. So that's right.
I'm curious as to whether the implementation of NG 911 will result in more services applying, because I understand it's extremely expensive, so they will limit the number of services that are able to.
Yeah, the cost prohibitive, it may be cost prohibitive for some places to implement it. Something that was just discussed, and Director Hill's on the leading edge of this. He had some discussions with Bell Canada as well as the NG 911, and there's an opportunity of hosting other services through our system. And so that was just finalized in the last week or so. I am nowhere near technically competent enough to discuss how that works. But that was something that was discussed at the NINA conference, and so we may be in a position to host others.
That'd be a revenue.
Looking positive. Then I guess moving on to the next one is financial reports from the chief. I think it was going to be verbal.
So, yeah, the financial update is, and I'm not sure that everybody is aware, but Donna Flood, our financial coordinator, I got a message. She had talked to me about her health, and she advised that she wasn't in a position that long-term she'd be able to continue in the role. So we posted for a replacement with her blessing, and within a couple of weeks, unfortunately, Donna passed away suddenly. And so we had no financial coordinator for the summer other than myself, and Director Flynn looked after payroll, and I looked after payables and invoicing. Kept the lights on. Well, up until this morning, we kept the lights on.
No fault of yours.
So we've hired now since then to replace Donna, and but there's a big learning gap with me trying to explain things to our new financial coordinator and get her online, and great help and coordination and assistance from the city, and Kate Allen over at the city has been amazing to work with, as well as Karen and Andrea. They've really helped keep us going. Emily's not up to speed yet, so it's a crash course for her, and Emily Sox is our new financial coordinator, and so it's been a crash course for her on everything to learn about the police department. And as far as getting monthly numbers, we're still behind, and we've sent out invoices now, but we're still behind in receiving that money. So any numbers that we would give you aren't really accurate at this time. So we're in a position that we're going to be working to get that caught up now, as well as getting her up to speed and budgeting for 2022, because we're needing to get that moving forward as well. So a big loss to the police service, but hopefully we'll be in a better position next month to provide you with some updated financial numbers.
And Kate at the city, she's on side with us with everything else. She understands the issues we have.
Yeah,
She has no concern with financials at this point.
the only problem that she addressed was our revenue had dropped off significantly, that I wasn't keeping up to date on the invoicing. but our expenses were no higher than normal, so she wasn't concerned in the overall picture of things, because it probably was the fact that we hadn't sent out any invoices.
Timing issue.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on then, number 18, operating reports, chief's activity report.
Yeah, you can see the chief's activity report for June, July, and August. Certainly lots of things going on over the summer. It really didn't slow down at all. I think that's one maybe disadvantage of Zoom meetings and the ability to meet virtually, is there wasn't that big break, but a number of conference calls with the city re-COVID and our policing partners every month. There was the Ospsb board and conference AGM in June. Solicitor General, and there were a couple of conference calls with the Solicitor General relating to COVID and the changes as things opened back up. Ospsb board and conference again. There's an AGM in July. Number of hours spent with the drug strategy. In August, CACP AGM and conference, and there's a day of remembrance of Wiquidong that we attended, and spent some time working with Great Child Family Services as well. So there was a number of things over the holidays that kept us busy, and the holidays and sick time had to wait because we had no financial coordinator. So we may see increased holidays coming up by the end of the year.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And I guess under other items, there's we also added to the agenda crime severity numbers. Do you want to speak to those briefly?
So on July 27th, StatsCan released the 2020 police reported crime statistics in Canada report. There's a lot of data sheets on the back that have been included here, but I've summarized it basically in the table at the top. And for those who aren't familiar with it, there's a uniform crime reporting survey that gets done, and all the crimes are weighted for the community, so that it tries to balance out the size of the community and the geography that it carries, so that it's uniform across country, so that they can make statistical comparisons and identify trends. So you can see here in Canada, the crime severity, overall crime severity, violent crime severity, and non-violent crime severity. and it's actually gone down somewhat for overall and violent and non-violent crime, significantly down from 2019 to 2020. For Owen Sound, you'll see that the overall crime severity is gone down slightly, but our rank has gone up, and violent crime has increased, and our rank has gone down, and non-violent crime has should be a 107. It's increased slightly, and our rank's gone up slightly. So there's some difficulties in small towns in the weighting that it's done. You have one significant event like a homicide, and all of a sudden your violent crime is going to be through the roof. But overall, it's marked. It's a measuring tool. But there certainly are some concerns and areas to address, and being responsive to everything doesn't allow us to do a lot of proactive work. Hopefully some of the work that the core unit will do will help address some of those issues.
Do you find, and we're in open session and perhaps you can't be very candid, but when the chiefs get together, are these useful numbers? Like, I just, what's with British Columbia, for example, right? Or Alberta? I don't see any Maritimes on here at all. There's lots of built-in distortions, aren't there, as you mentioned?
There are built-in distortions, but it still gives you a measuring stick and where you sit, because if you look at similar sized communities, or if you look at communities that have similar demographics to your own, things like that, yeah, and you see where they sit and where you sit, there's certainly it raises questions, and you have to look at it's about as it's kind of like comparing your community to another community of 20,000, but that community's 50% or 70% rural, and you're 100% urban, and so it's not possible to compare some of those things.
I don't know what to conclude from these stats. I'm really wrong. By the way, you say Kenora and Timmins are higher than us, and so is Brockville. I think. Just a heads up.
Yeah, Brockville led country led Ontario last year. So
it's Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay, and Windsor are just below us, like just below us. So
yeah,
And much larger centers too.
Yeah, I did the number. I didn't this year. I did the number crunches the last couple of years, and the top 30, I think, in the country, 25 of them were under 40,000 people.
yes.
So, it's more the trend that you look at. Are you going up? Are you going down? How are you doing that? I think it's probably the thing you can support.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that I want to highlight is the fact that all of Canada went down, and Owen Sound continued to rise in most of them. So it's something we have to keep an eye on.
It's not an exact science, but I think it tells a story that there is more crime happening in smaller urban centers.
Yeah,
I said it's not an exact science.
Yeah, I'm not buying that, but somehow based on population, however they do it, somehow it's smaller towns. The numbers seem to percolate up. So it's
who's the winner again? Huronia West, which is Springwater. That's where you want to live.
I don't know if they have I don't know that the Huronia West actually has an urban center.
the difficulty is when these numbers come out, all of a sudden it hits the press, and everybody in the community goes, "Oh, this is an awful place to live." You know, no, it's not.
I think that's the important message. Is it's a
We're
measuring
worse than
stick.
Windsor. We're worse than Toronto. We're worse than
What does that mean?
Okay, then move to Scarborough.
No, thank you.
Right?
Yeah. Where you don't want to live. I did think maybe that sentence was inadvertent, Chief, though, but when you said only Kenora and Timmins are worse than Owen Sound, when I looked at it, first of all, Brockville's a little worse, and then Thunder Bay and Windsor are clustered so close to us.
Yeah. I thought Brockville and their overall was less than us, but I'd have to look at it.
It's a tough thing to read.
But it's
What days did Thursday? Dinner Tuesday night. The person sitting next to me was from Kenora and was talking about the issues they got, and it is tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have problems.
The next thing that I wanted to highlight was the, Dave, if you want to do that, or I will, but the opioid situation report. And I think it falls in line with what Inspector Bishop was talking about earlier, and that is that we can't lose track of the number of opioid deaths or suspected opioid deaths. Obviously, it's not until toxicology comes in, there's no proof that it's related to opioid use, but this is a local perspective and put out by the health unit, despite all the other things that they're doing.
I get the distinct impression it relates a lot to the quality of the substances ingested, because there's no way of knowing when you buy on the street what it contains. So do some of the cutting or whatever happens with, say, an excessive amount of carfentanil or something cause the.
There is no quality control, and so it's Russian roulette. It takes such a small amount of fentanyl to overdose that that certainly is one of the issues. Is the safe supply, but this just highlights what public health has been doing in harm reduction and naloxone's program, the work of the opioid working group, and provide some more information for the community.
I think to the quality of what they make it with, they couldn't get the good stuff, so they were getting a lot of synthetic drugs, and that was causing a problem.
And the people doing it don't know how to properly
Makes it.
cut it or what to cut it with.
Next thing I'll just highlight is the summer student IFE program, and it was mentioned in Jason's report, CSO report. But I just want to highlight the work that he did on, doing the interviews, posting for the jobs at the schools, doing the interviews of the students, and then selecting amazing candidates for the program. 4 local youth were selected: Mandy Linklater, Noah Lundgren, Grace Folks, and Natu Shamandi. And Natu is a recent immigrant from Eritrea, and his journey to come to Canada was an interesting story, and I think he taught the people here just as much as we taught him. And this was his first work opportunity in Canada. He enjoyed himself immensely. He started out as a very shy, very quiet, very laid-back individual, and then really came into himself and couldn't get over the friendliness and the atmosphere here within the station, and so he really enjoyed his summer. The other 3 took him under their wing and assisted him. He had his roles at the bike rodeo. He was doing bike helmet fittings and things like that, and it was a great opportunity. And I just want to credit Jason for the role that he created to help Natu and to bring him along, and the work that he did with him. So it was a great summer and great students, and they were very independent. They could be sent out on their bicycles, and they did the positive ticketing program within the community, and they did a number of events at Elpha Street, different areas in the community. So great work by Jason, great work by the students, and they should be credited for the job they did as well. So.
Interesting with that too, that most services shut that down. I think we were one of only 2 or 3 in the province.
Yeah.
We're going to keep it running, so safety, but almost everywhere else it is.
Not a high priority.
Didn't happen for the last couple of years.
And then the last thing on the, and I'll turn it over to Inspector Sweeney for this, but it's the towing contract that's come up.
Yeah, so just our regular towing contract for the police service expired back at the end of May. So the city, acting on behalf of the board, put out RFP for towing services. There's only one vendor, which was Stewart's Towing, as it was before. And so there's just a very slight increase in the fees. Towing would be $80, and 24 hours of storage would be $30. This is just slightly over what the fees were before, $70 per tow and $25 per impound. We've had no issues with Stewart's Towing at all. We just need a motion to approve this new contract, which will commence on the date of award and expire on October 31st, 2022, with the option of 2 additional 1-year extensions.
Also,
Thanks, John. Seconder?
Sure.
Sure, thank you. Joe, in favor?
It's on wave. there.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
And Ian, yes,
Yeah.
yes, okay, great, thank you. All right, I think that concludes the agenda items we had for today, so I'm going to terminate the meeting at 11:40. We'll take a 10-minute recess or 10-minute break, and then we'll move into the, pick up the confidential side of the meetings we just left a while ago, and if you want to log into the third meeting invite that you received, that will get us back all together at 10 to 12, 11:50. Okay, thank you, everyone.